My name is Shahid. I lived in the capital city of Somalia. I was a young man who deeply loved education and believed in building a better future through learning. I shared a room with my older brother, Abdi. Abdi was a hard-working man. He worked while continuing his own studies. Although education in Somalia was free, everything related to my daily life, food, shelter, clothing, and other necessities was provided by my brother Abdi. Abdi was not only my brother, he was like a second father to me. He raised me with love, patience, and hope. At that time, my life felt stable and safe, even though I did not yet know that difficult days were approaching, days that would change my life, my dreams, and my heart forever. One day, toward the end of 1990, a sudden war broke out in the capital city of the country where we lived. At that time, I did not truly understand how serious the war was. I was still a young boy, unfamiliar with war and the disasters it brings. Although the fighting was happening in neighborhoods far from us, with each passing day, it grew stronger and closer. The sound of violence crept toward our lives. My brother Abdi used to work at the American embassy, but the embassy was eventually closed, and there was no more work. One morning, Abdi and I went to visit our grandfather, Xasuus, at his home in the Seagale neighborhood. When we arrived, many people were gathered there. Our grandfather and his wife Widow were also present. After sitting together for a while, the conversation turned to the hardships in the war. We later left and began walking back to where we lived, in the Hall Wadog neighborhood. Along the way, we saw people fleeing tired, frightened, and suffering. I remember Abdi suddenly stopping and saying with anger and pain, "Who is responsible for this suffering? Where are the wise people of this country?" Abdi was deeply upset. We continued walking, but there were no more words between us. We both remained silent. I could see great worry on Abdi's face. When we were not far from our home, Abdi suddenly stopped again and looked at me. He said, "Brother, I am leaving." I asked him, "Where are you going?" He replied, "I am going to Kenya, and I will take you to stay with a friend of mine who lives in Africa." Without hesitation, I answered him, "Brother, I will stay with Aunt Amina. I am not going to Africa." Abdi fell silent for a moment. Then he removed a beautiful watch, still new, from his wrist, and placed it on my hand. At that time, I did not understand why he did that. But later, when I grew older, I realized it was a memory of brotherhood, a silent farewell filled with love.
That time, I went to the house of my Aunt Amina, which was not far from where we lived. My brother Abdi returned directly to the house we had been living in. He collected a few of his belongings and then left. When I arrived at Aunt Amina's house, I told her everything that had happened. She said to me, "Stay here with us until the situation changes." After that, I went back to the house where we had lived and gathered all of my belongings, along with the items Abdi had left behind. From that moment, I officially moved into Aunt Amina's house to live there. Aunt Amina lived in a beautiful home and was financially stable. Living in that house were Aunt Amina, her children, and my brother Ibrahim Arte, who had lived with her since childhood. I stayed there for several weeks. After some time, the war reached Hall Wadog, the neighborhood where we had previously lived. The government began bombarding the area with heavy artillery, and people started fleeing their homes. It was a new and terrifying reality for us, a disaster we had never experienced before. Because of fear and hardship, we were also forced to flee the neighborhood. We left Ibrahim Arte behind to guard the house and protect it from looters. We got into a car owned by our aunt and headed toward Medina. We arrived in Medina safely, alhamdulillah. I do not remember who owned the house where we stayed in the Medina neighborhood, but I remember that there were relatives, there are people. I lived in that house in Medina for about 1 week. One day, at around 11 o'clock in the morning, I decided to go and visit my grandfather. Nur Saashi Kala and his family. They had fled from the Seagull neighborhood and were then living in a place called Danwadagaha near KM4. The distance between Medina and Danwadagaha was too far to walk east. It took me a long time to reach that area, but by the will of Allah, my decision suddenly changed. I decided to pass by the place where my grandfather was staying and instead continued toward Dog, specifically to my Aunt Amino's house, where we had left my brother Ibrahim. I kept walking, and after some time I reached the house in Halwa. As I was walking, I could occasionally hear and see rockets landing in the neighborhood, although the shelling was no longer as intense as it had been before. When I saw Ibrahim, he looked extremely exhausted. After exchanging greetings, my brother Ibrahim Arte asked me to stay in the house and guard it. He said to me, "I am very tired of this place, and the explosions have worn me out. I want to go and rest." I agreed. Ibrahim headed toward Medina, and I remained behind in the house to protect it.
After Ibrahim left for Medina to rest, I remained in the house in Halwadag, completely alone. I stayed there for several days. There was very little food, and from time to time rockets landed nearby, although most of them struck houses that had already been abandoned. By the mercy of Allah, I survived everything that was happening around me. So as far as I can remember, I spent several nights there by myself. One morning at around 9:30 a.m., someone knocked on the front gate. "Who is it?" I asked. In those days, opening a door was never easy because of the security situation. "Open, it's Hawiya," she replied. I quickly opened the gate. Hawiya did not speak. She walked straight into the house. Her face was filled with fear and deep sadness. I was still standing there in confusion with the gate open when Aunt Amino Kilmi entered. She too said nothing and walked past me. Her face showed shock and grief. At that moment, I felt immediately that something was terribly wrong, but I was afraid to ask any questions. They were my aunts, people who were like parents to me. Suddenly, Hawiya spoke in a sorrowful voice. "The boys have been killed." She then slowly said their names one by one. Abdirrahman Arte, my eldest brother. Abdirisak Noor Hashi, my father's cousin. And Sheikh Mohammed, a close friend of my grandfather, Noor Hashi Alice. I did not speak. The words struck me with shock and disbelief. My mind froze. Aunt Amino then told me to go and call an uncle, a relative of her husband. I tried to pick up a t-shirt I had washed earlier that morning, but every time I moved toward it, I found myself returning to the same spot. I kept walking back and forth, unaware of what I was doing. One of the women said quietly, "The boy is in shock." The uncle arrived, spoke briefly with the women, and then left. He never returned. About an hour later, Aunt Amino, Hawiya, and the woman who had accompanied them left for Medina. The bodies of the men who had been killed were still lying where they had been murdered, not yet buried. I remained alone in the house. Sleep never came. My entire body trembled with fear. My thoughts were constantly consumed by worry. Where my grandfather Noor Hashi, his wife Adogawido, and the others who had been with them might have gone. Later, I was told that my grandfather, his wife, and several young girls had fled the place where they had been staying, but no one knew where they had gone.